Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for watching my video, and do all that good YouTube stuff. Share it, like it, hit the notification bell, thumbs up, subscribe, all the things that you do. Thanks for taking the time to watch my video and saving some money perhaps. I also invite you to check out the links in the description for some long-term savings with the stock market, and checking out the links for either E-Trade or M1, where you can save and trade fractional stocks, or Webull, which is usually giving away a couple free stocks for just depositing $100. So I strongly invite you to invest in your future and check them out. Thanks, and let's get to the video. Subaru Forester Premium manual transmission. Gonna take it out. There's a clutch problem of some kind. So took the shield off, took some bolts out already for fun. 14mm bolts here, there, shield up here, took it off. 12mm bolts holding it on. It's right here. And first thing that had to come off is this plastic shield. It's got some 12 or 14mm bolts holding it up as well, and 3 black clips. Kind of don't really see this one on the driver's side, but it's there. 12mm bolts for the exhaust shield. Little black clips. The center pulls up and out like that, and then you can pull it out and it snaps back in. That's locked in place. Got 3 of those on that black shield. We need to take the drive line, all-wheel drive, so we'll take this drive line out. Got 4 12mm bolts, take those out. And we'll take our 2 14mm bolts here for this center bearing support. Take that out, and then we should be able to slide it out of the transmission. Depending on what year your vehicle is and when you're seeing this video, just kind of be careful. This rubber can get dry and cracky and possibly break. Try and keep it as straight as possible. And we'll get that out, and then we'll continue on here with more of these brackets. Of course, take the CV axles out. There's a good chance we can take the pinch bolt out and just push the whole tire assembly out of the way on both sides. Pinch bolt, again 14mm probably. Push the wheel up out of the way, and that's what we're looking at. So that's the starter up there. I'm going to take that 14mm bolt out of there. It goes through the transmission, of course. I was already up top. I'll hopefully show you that stuff later. Taking out 14mm bolt on the top of the starter, and transmission mount bracket, and a couple bolts on this side as well. Already 14mm. So then we got a 14mm nut on the stud here, 14mm nut on the stud there, another 14mm bolt. And so I'm just going to pry this, take a pry bar and pry this out a little bit and see if any fluid comes out before I drain it. T70 Torx bit right here if I need to. When looking at the axle removal process, it didn't say anything about draining fluid first, so that's that. Alright, taking the starter out, and we'll go from there. And we'll just push it up top somewhere on top of the heater hoses up there. So I took the pinch bolt out using a pry bar, prying down. Wish I could tell you it's always as easy as this, but you can kind of see the rust build up a little bit, so it can definitely be more of a struggle. And you could end up having to take the front tires off to get to just start working at it. But this has been pretty fortunate, I think. It's coming out. It's out. Maybe we'll clean that up while we have the chance. Do the same for the other side. maybe we'll see if we can get this out. Might get something to brace on here. I don't want to pry on these teeth here. So I'm going to try and get something to brace it.
So out of all of that shit on that Kia, did you see any reason for that belt jumping?
No, did not see a reason for the belt to jump.
Oh, that's just weird. Just weird shit, Todd.
Yep. So we do have fluid coming out, so I'm going to drain it. It's a T70 Torx bit on the bottom there to drain the fluid. It goes without saying your vehicle is going to be off the ground. You may choose to take the lug nuts off when it's on the ground, and then you can break them loose or turn or two. All nuts and bolts are left to loosen, right to tighten. I've kind of chosen that the axle did not come out easily. It's too long. So I unstaked that a little bit with a small screwdriver and a hammer. I can take that out and I can maybe try and pull it through, pull the tire out and pull it out that way. Pull the tire out. I'm just going to go ahead and take the tire off. It might let a little bit more light in for me and just make things overall easier. For 5 lug nuts, for me it's worth it. So that's what I'm going to do. Zip off the 5 lug nuts. Zip that off. I'll tell you what size it is, and then we'll probably get that axle out, and we'll do the same for both sides. .32mm socket. Tip to break things loose, you can put a little screwdriver in here. Well, a medium-sized screwdriver in there of some kind. Of course, when you turn it, it's going to stop against the rotor. Just put it on one side or the other, depending on if you're tightening or loosening. So that's a tip on breaking the axle nuts loose. I feel I can kind of tap on this a little bit because there's no threads on the end, but if there's threads to the very end, you don't want to tap on a hammer. With a hammer, it'll mushroom it up. Little C-clip on the end. When you're putting this back in, you want to pack this groove probably with some grease. It'll help center the clip to make it easier when you push it back in the transmission. We'll do the same for the other side. Up top on the Subaru for the transmission removal for the clutch. 8mm 5/16 or a flat blade. Same here. And there's a push pin here. Pull the center up and out, and then you can free it here. There's a hose. Chose not to disconnect. You can see just where it goes right in here. Two 14mm bolts holding this on. Right there. Mostly 14mm bolts. 10mm ground wire. Right there. This one in here. Take that out. 14mm bolt here. 14mm bolt and nut set up here. Two long bolts. Shorter bolt, longer bolt. Disconnect these two things right here for the transmission. Push down on the tab probably. Should have done it when it was not connected. And a 14mm starter bolt. Take that out as well on the top. You see it's set off to the side. So I got two transmission bolts over here, starter bolt over there. I think that's everything up top for you. And I'm just going to work on pushing these tabs down. To release those connectors, they're going to go with the transmission. So I haven't done this before, I haven't watched other videos on it, so I don't know if you have to take the exhaust off. I'm assuming you might not have to, but it's a 14mm and probably 12mm for the two bolts and nuts here. I'm going to take all this black bracketry off myself here. The transmission should be able to hang fine all by itself without this mount stuff here. 14mm bolts here, probably 17mm bolt on the side here. And I'm going to take these two bolts out here, bolt and nut, 14mm over here, 14mm, and then we'll need to get off at some point this shield here, probably take the shift cables off. One's pretty easy to get to right here, the other one is up higher. My thought is we can pull it back and drop it down because of the slack in the cabling. That's my thought, and we're going to see how it goes. Four nuts off here, four 10mm nuts off this cover. Pretty easy access here to the cables. You spread these little wires out with your fingers. Pop this out of there. I'll probably get a screwdriver in here and pop this off probably. It's almost coming off. Then we got two clips. We can pull these down and slide the cables through nicely. A little easier access right here. This one's down further, like maybe someone's been here already or something. But yeah, we'll pop this off, and then we'll have the cables ready to go with the transmission. Oh, and I was talking about the exhaust here, two bolts here, and three bolts, nuts right here. If you want to do this, I'd spray them liberally with some lubricant of your choice before you take them off. Three 14mm nuts. So yes, as we talked about, I supported the engine with my jack, and then I took the two 17mm bolts out, one on each side, took these two nuts off, and dropped it down. Then I lowered my transmission stand, jack stand, and yes, the engine and transmission then leaned back towards me. And it gave me enough, I dropped it down enough so I can get the black bracketry out, as you see there. And I got the jack stand back on. Got my bolts out and nuts. That rusty piece back there is a double pin. It's rusty on both sides. We'll see how easy it comes out. And you'll note I did take the exhaust off. That's what the instructions said, so I figured what the heck. Why would I not take it out? I'd try to avoid it, is to avoid nuts getting galled and jammed and seized on studs. Fortunately, nothing happened. There's a metal gasket in there. So that's really why I try to avoid touching exhaust if I can, or some bolts. People in the rust states can certainly understand where I came from. Lots of rust in Minnesota in the Rust Belt. So I think we're about ready to try and pull this out. And see what happens. You got the metal shield up there. So I might take, I don't even know how I can get to it. So we're just going to try and take the transmission out. Some wiggling and pulling. I'm a little fearful. I'll spray some penetrant on those dowel pins, but they do have a tendency to get locked up on there. So I'm going to spray those and let them sit for a little bit. Pry bar. Small pry bar maybe. Right up in here. And I'm not quite sure about the angle of the transmission and the engine. It could be off a little bit. Oh, that sounded pretty good though. So, all right.
Off on this side completely.
We're pretty off. On or off. Subaru has a special tool they mount up there to tilt the engine. We're going to probably just somehow push up in the front. Oh, maybe just right on the exhaust. We'll push up and tilt it. Jacked it up another inch or two, and then apparently it's coming out. So that's all, kind of all there is to it. Ooh, look at that. There's some scoring involved. It was hanging up, not working properly all the time, so we'll be replacing some stuff. That's a new throwout bearing, because look at the old one here. Ooh. Not good. There is some wear on this. It's not exactly perfectly smooth, and the diameter's not perfect, but $6,500 for a new transmission. He wasn't really ready to split with that much money. So we're going to put this new throwout bearing on here. We'll put some lubricant on here, put a little lubricant on the splines. And we got our new bearing that'll ride on this, which is going to be right here. Get your flywheel replaced or machined. Here's a new bearing. We're going to put this on a hard surface and we'll drive this. So you want it flush with this. So that's what we're going to do next. Socket's a little bigger so it won't drive it through. So we're good. Got some lubricant on the pin here. Got some lubricant on the little fingers of the fork. Nice. Some clippy clips.
Technically speaking.
Put it in the little hole and then wrap it around here and it'll snap onto those little ears. Hole on this side too. Snap in the hole, wrap it around here, and should snap into place there. A little dab of lubricant in there as well. Did that on this side too. There's a little ball in there, lubricated that. Again, and a little fingers on the fork. So we'll put a little lubricant on the splines as well and slide the clutch disc on there. There's our new clutch disc. Pressure plate. Clean this off too of anti-rust material. So we'll get a little lubricant on the splines here. So I've got is some extreme purple ceramic brake lubricant. And put some on these splines. And we'll slide our disc plate on there. Doesn't matter which way we slide it on at the moment, but of course we'll want to put this on the right way. I'm going to put this on here like this and slide it back and forth a few times, get all the lubricant worked in the right place there, good coverage. So it's going to be beautiful. We'll just make sure there's a decent amount of grease on there. You don't want to over grease it. You don't want the grease flipping out and getting on the surface of the clutch disc. So lubricate that, and then we'll clean some stuff up. We got to bolt our flywheel on the engine. Crankshaft sensor disc there. We'll bolt that all up there. I'll give you the torque specs. So when we're putting this transmission and this pointy thing back in the engine, we want everything to line up. That needs to go in the center of that pilot bearing. These splines then of course need to go through the center of the clutch disc, and you need an alignment pin. They sell kits. We're lucky we save all of these. in a box. This one actually says Subaru and it fits, so I'm pretty happy about that. You just take this with the clutch disc and we'll put it up here and mount it up there, and that'll keep everything really nice and center when we bolt on the pressure plate. So we'll see that in just a little bit. 22.1 foot-pounds on those, and then another 30 to 35 degrees, which came out to be about 90 foot-pounds. I numbered them to help me remember where I was, especially with the torque to, not torque to yield, but the degrees. So you probably need to have a torque wrench that has degrees on it. Pretty much like that. And we'll take our pressure plate, put it on top, and we will bolt it down. And we'll be giving you the torque specs for all that then. So pretty important right here to get this lined up so that the transmission goes on nice and straight and everything lines up there, because you can imagine if this is down below or off to the side, that hole's not going to line up and make it darn near impossible to put everything together. All right, 11.8 foot-pounds. That's a torque spec on these bolts. 11.8 foot-pounds. Kind of like to give this a little bit of a wiggle and make sure it feels like it's in the center. You know, it stays pretty good on its own, but I like to just give it a wiggle. I think it has a tendency to gravity to hang down just a smidge, so I like to bump it up a little bit if I can. And then I start the bolts so they're snug, and just make sure it goes in and out smooth. It does seem to go in pretty smooth. If it doesn't, then you know you're going to have a problem with the transmission, and you want to reset it so it's easier to go in and out there. So we'll just torque those down, crisscross, 11.8 foot-pounds. Do a little bit at a time is best. Don't want these fingers binding up. And then we could slide the transmission in and shouldn't be too much of a problem. Again, as you saw, probably the key was we're tilting the engine here. I'm going to tilt the front up so the back goes down. And then just make sure that your alignment is a nice 90-degree alignment. You know, up here the space is even, and the space down here is even. When you got the transmission up here, make it much easier, of course, to push on when it's even. All right, so we get the transmission up here. It's close, it's maybe within an inch or so. Still not connected to the dowel pins though. Working on my angle so the space between the top and the bottom of the engine and transmission is even. I'm feeling pretty good about it, and I'm pushing on it from back here, but I don't have the most weight behind me to make things happen. You can also maybe try and turn this. Might turn the front output shaft there. Probably the input shaft at the front of the transmission, but in case those splines need to be just encouraged to come together. So you get the studs in there. So we're really close. There's really not a lot to film. Just get your alignment as good as you can, and you gotta just kind of push and work your way in. Once it's on the dowel pins, you might be able to pull it in with bolts, but this distance is too far. I wouldn't recommend it. All right, it is 98% mounted. The dowel pins in there on both sides. So working on getting that angle right. And then what helped with me, I pulled on one of these. I think I put it in gear, hopefully A gear, and I mounted this here. And then I was turning it, get those splines to line up with each other in the clutch disc. And it seemed to pop into place after turning that just the right amount. So that's my one tip for you. Turn this while pushing, and it seemed to pop into place for me. Then we'll bolt up what we can on the bottom here and then go to the top. So it looks like the nuts and bolts for the transmission to engine including the starter bolts, are 36.9 foot-pounds. Everything is left to loosen, right to tighten. Right, so you're putting the Subaru axles back in. I like to take a little grease and pack this little groove here. Kind of helps hold this clip centered, which is hopefully important so that when you slide in the transmission it'll evenly collapse, making it easier to go in. Also put some grease on the seal. So, give it a shot here, and also trying to get that thing as straight as possible when you're pushing it in. Try to have the clip, so the opening on the clip point down as well. See how it goes. Then one go. Want to be careful pulling it in and out as well to not hopefully tear and ruin the seals. We'll just grab the shaft and give it a few jabs in. Hopefully it'll pop into place. Boom. First try, pretty nice. It's in. We'll just pull this back and pop it in place. So I didn't really need anything else to put this back together except my hand pulling down really and getting this to go back in. Just keep an eye on this and make sure it's straight all the way around. I gave it a few taps with a hammer and it popped into place, but if it's cockeyed, don't be tapping it with a hammer, you get a wedge. So try and keep everything as even as possible when you're putting that in. I clean stuff up with a wire brush where there's a little bit of rust to help if there's a next time, and put a little anti-seize on the bolt. So we'll put that in and tighten it down and keep going here. We'll put the nut on, and I'll torque those down as well and restake them. Got 162 foot-pounds. Got our screwdriver stuck in a vein in the rotor. It's 162 foot-pounds and stake basically in the same spot, so we're good to go. Do the same for the other side on that. Just about done. Basic shot of the covers underneath, 12mm bolts. Some push pins as well, that'll go in here on the sides. Same for the other side. And you got this plate here, 12mm bolts too. And some push pins. And there's one over here, right up there. For that there, that's your bottom covers. There's the push pin. That's in the release position. Let's see if we can find a spot here. Oof! There you go. Screwdriver in here, pull the center out, and then you're good. Alright, lug nuts are about 90 foot-pounds. I think it's 88.5. Tighten them in a crisscross pattern. Good to go there. Snap your fittings back together. There's a dipstick down here, kind of hard to see. We'll add our Subaru manual transmission fluid. An alternative is 75-90, although it says may have some drivability or fuel economy issues. So you can top that off. If it's empty, I think it takes about 3.5 quarts. Just use the dipstick to measure it. I'm sure it has a low and a full mark on it. And we'll slide this back on. Here, 8mm clamp. Here, 8mm clamp. Push pin in here. Hook up the battery. 10mm bolt. And that should be good to go. I think I've shown you enough on your 2016 Subaru Forester. Clutch replacement, manual transmission removal and replacement. Bolt things down, make them tight. You can consider taking this bracket out, might make it a little easier. Interferes a little bit with taking the transmission out. Just a 12mm bolt holding it in place. Back there in the corner, and you can push up on it a little bit, give you a little space if you choose to do so. I think that's it. Good luck to you.